The sprawling mansion of the Harrington family stood proudly on the edge of Crestwood Hills, its white marble columns gleaming in the morning sun. Inside, every step echoed wealth, expensive art, crystal chandeliers, and furniture imported from Paris. Yet despite all the riches, there was a constant hum of tension in the household. The source of that tension was often Ethan Harrington, the only son of billionaire Charles Harrington. Ethan was 22, reckless, and spoiled by a lifetime of never hearing the word no. He had grown up believing that his father's fortune gave him immunity from consequences. His arrogance was legendary, not only in the family but across the entire city. On the other side of the wealth divide was Elena, a 27-year-old maid hired just a few months earlier. Elena had come from humble beginnings, her soft accent revealing her immigrant roots. She was diligent, polite, and always carried herself with quiet grace despite the difficult circumstances of her life. What no one in the Harrington mansion knew was that Elena was 3 months pregnant. She rarely spoke of her husband. In fact, most of the staff didn't know much about him. She wore her wedding ring, but whenever questions arose, she deflected them with a gentle smile. There was a certain air of mystery around her. Who was this man she was married to, and why did she keep it such a guarded secret? That morning, the Harrington mansion was buzzing with activity. A dinner party was being prepared to celebrate Charles Harrington's latest business victory. Elena was tasked with arranging the dining hall, carefully placing silverware on the long oak table. She worked steadily, her hands moving with quiet precision, humming under her breath to keep herself calm. Ethan walked in, dressed in a designer suit, his phone in one hand and a scowl on his face. He had been out late the previous night, indulging in the excesses his father's money allowed, and now his temper was short. "What's taking so long?" Ethan snapped, glancing at the table Elena was preparing. "Do you expect my father's guests to wait while you crawl around like a snail?" Elena looked up, startled. "I'm almost finished, sir. Just a few more minutes." Her calm tone only seemed to irritate him more. "Don't talk back. Just do your job faster," he barked. She lowered her eyes and nodded. "Yes, sir." But Ethan wasn't done. He stepped closer, noticing how she instinctively shielded her stomach with one hand as she bent down to pick up a napkin. "What's this?" he sneered. "You're pregnant." Elena's face paled. She hadn't planned on anyone noticing so soon. "Yes, sir," she whispered. Ethan scoffed. "Unbelievable. A pregnant maid in my father's house. You people never think, do you? You'll probably be useless in a few months. Should have kept your legs closed." The words cut deep, but Elena stayed silent. She had dealt with cruelty before, but the venom in Ethan's tone stung more than she expected. She continued working, trying to ignore him, but Ethan's frustration boiled over. When Elena accidentally dropped a silver spoon, he exploded. "Clumsy idiot," he shouted, and before anyone could react, he shoved his foot into her side. Elena gasped, stumbling backward, clutching her belly in shock. The pain was sharp, but the fear that something had happened to her baby was sharper. She steadied herself against the table, tears welling in her eyes. The room fell silent for a brief moment as another maid nearby dropped the tray she was carrying. Everyone stared in horror, but none dared to speak. Ethan, realizing what he had done, only smirked arrogantly. "Maybe next time you'll learn to be more careful," he said coldly, and turned away as if nothing had happened. Elena stood, trembling, her heart racing. She knew she had to stay calm, for her child, but the humiliation and pain pressed heavily on her chest. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but something inside told her to wait. She whispered to herself, "He doesn't know. He has no idea who my husband is." That thought gave her a small spark of strength. Ethan might have believed he was untouchable, but Elena knew that his arrogance would soon be his downfall. Because her husband was no ordinary man, and when the truth came out, Ethan Harrington would regret every cruel word and every violent act. The stage was set for a reckoning. The silence in the dining hall lingered long after Ethan stormed out. Elena steadied herself, her trembling hands resting over her stomach. The other maids whispered nervously, their eyes darting to the door as if Ethan might return at any moment. "Are you all right?" One of the older maids, Rosa, whispered, rushing to Elena's side. "I'll be fine," Elena said softly, though her voice shook. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I just need a moment." She excused herself and slipped into the small servants' quarters at the back of the mansion. Closing the door behind her, she let the tears fall freely. Anger, pain, and fear collided inside her chest. She knew Ethan thought he was untouchable, but what he didn't realize was that the world outside his father's mansion did not bow to his arrogance. Pulling out her phone, Elena hesitated. She had promised her husband she wouldn't call him for every minor hardship she faced at work. But this was no minor matter. Her baby could have been hurt. She needed him to know. She dialed his number with trembling fingers. "Hello," a deep, steady voice answered. "Elena." His tone instantly sharpened at the sound of her broken breathing. "What happened? Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm fine. The baby is fine. But something happened at work today. Ethan, she paused, struggling to find the words. Her husband's voice hardened, carrying a dangerous edge. "What did he do?" "He kicked me," she whispered. "He was angry. I tried to ignore him, but he hurt me." In front of everyone. For a long moment, there was silence on the line. Elena could hear her husband's breathing, slow and deliberate, as if he were holding back a storm. "Elena," he said finally, his voice calm but laced with steel, "you listen to me. You rest. Don't lift another finger in that house. I'll take care of this." "Honey, please," she said quickly, fear rising in her chest. "Don't do anything reckless. He's the boss's son. If you confront him, it could." "Elena," he interrupted firmly, "you know who I am. Do you think a spoiled boy frightens me? He doesn't even realize who he laid hands on." Her tears slowed. She closed her eyes, listening to the calm certainty in his tone. He wasn't just her husband, he was a man whose presence commanded respect in places Ethan Harrington couldn't even imagine. "I'll be there tonight," he added. "And when I arrive, they will all understand." When the call ended, Elena sat quietly, her heart torn between fear and relief. She knew what her husband was capable of. And she knew Ethan Harrington's days of arrogance were numbered. That evening, the Harrington mansion gleamed with lights as guests began arriving for the dinner party. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Ethan, dressed in his finest tuxedo, strutted about, soaking in the attention. He had already forgotten the morning's incident. To him, Elena was just a servant, insignificant and replaceable. But as the night went on, whispers began circulating among the staff. A man had arrived at the gates, demanding to be let in. His presence was impossible to ignore. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura that seemed to silence those around him. His sharp eyes and commanding stride gave away that he wasn't an ordinary guest, or an ordinary husband. The guards, usually brash with visitors, stepped aside after only a few words from him. One even stammered nervously, clearly recognizing the man. He entered the mansion without hesitation, his dark suit crisp, his gaze fixed like steel. As he stepped into the glittering dining hall, conversation faltered. Guests turned, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Even Charles Harrington himself looked up from his seat at the head of the table, frowning slightly at the unexpected intrusion. And then Elena appeared at the edge of the hall, her eyes widening as she saw her husband striding toward her. Relief and dread mingled on her face. "Darling," he said gently, his voice softening as he approached her. He touched her cheek, checking her with protective eyes before turning his gaze toward Ethan. Ethan, lounging casually with a drink in his hand, raised an eyebrow. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" The man's eyes narrowed, and his jaw tightened. "I'm the man whose pregnant wife you kicked this morning." The room went still. Charles Harrington rose halfway from his chair, shock crossing his face. Guests exchanged confused looks. The weight of the man's words hung heavy in the air. Elena's husband didn't raise his voice, but the authority in his tone was undeniable. "And tonight, you will answer for it." Ethan scoffed, still smirking, but a flicker of unease crossed his expression. For the first time in his life, he was facing someone who wasn't intimidated by the Harrington name, or his money. The storm was about to break. The guests stared in stunned silence, forks frozen midair, as the stranger's words echoed through the grand dining hall. "I'm the man whose pregnant wife you kicked this morning." Ethan chuckled nervously, shifting in his seat. He had faced plenty of people who hated him, but none who dared to challenge him in front of his father's friends. "Listen, whoever you are," Ethan sneered, "you've clearly wandered into the wrong house." "Guards." He snapped his fingers toward the entrance. But the guards didn't move. Instead, they exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale. It was as though fear had anchored them in place. Charles Harrington's sharp eyes darted between his son, Elena, and the imposing man who stood before them. There was something in the stranger's presence, a power, an authority, that even he, a billionaire accustomed to commanding respect, could not ignore. "Who are you?" Charles demanded. The man turned his gaze to Charles, his expression calm but deadly serious. "My name is Captain Adrian Cole, former decorated officer, now head of a private security firm that protects some of the most powerful leaders in this nation." A ripple of whispers ran through the crowd. Several guests straightened in their seats, recognizing the name. Adrian Cole wasn't just another man, he was someone whose reputation carried weight in military and political circles. Ethan's smirk faltered. "So what? You think your title scares me?" Adrian stepped forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over Ethan. "I don't need a title to scare you. I just need the truth." His voice lowered, sharp and deliberate. "You kicked my wife while she carried my child. That's not just arrogance, that's an attack on my family." The tension in the room thickened. Elena stood frozen at the edge, her hands clasped tightly, praying her husband's anger wouldn't turn the evening into chaos. Charles raised a hand, his voice tight. "Ethan, is this true?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but pride wouldn't let him admit fault. "She dropped a spoon, father. I barely touched her. These people are exaggerating." Adrian's eyes burned. He looked directly at Charles. "Then ask your staff." Half the room saw it happen. The maids and butlers exchanged nervous glances. For a moment, no one dared to speak. Then Rosa, the older maid, stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "It's true, sir. Mr. Ethan kicked her. We all saw it." Gasps rippled through the room. Charles's face turned crimson with fury and humiliation. "You little fool," Charles hissed at his son. "Do you realize what you've done?" But Ethan pushed back, his voice rising. "So what? She's just a maid. Why are you all acting like she's royalty?" That was the final straw. Adrian seized Ethan by the collar, dragging him up from his seat with terrifying strength. Guests gasped, some rising in alarm, but no one dared to intervene. "Careful," Adrian growled, his voice low and deadly. "You're speaking about my wife, the woman carrying my child. You think her life is worthless because she serves in your mansion? Let me make something clear, if anything happens to her or my baby, no amount of your father's money will protect you." Ethan's face drained of color. For the first time, he felt the weight of real fear. Charles intervened, his voice shaking with desperation. "Mr. Cole, please, let him go. He's young, reckless. I'll ensure he apologizes." Adrian glared at Ethan for a long moment before shoving him back into his chair. Ethan coughed, his bravado shattered. Then Adrian turned to Charles. "You raised him to believe that power and money make him untouchable. But today he learned that there are men who don't bow to wealth." The room was silent. Every guest, every servant, every member of the Harrington family understood that they had witnessed something irreversible. Charles's shoulders slumped. For once, the proud billionaire seemed defeated. He turned to his son. "Apologize. Now." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but one look at Adrian's burning eyes silenced him. Swallowing hard, he muttered, "I'm sorry." Adrian didn't even glance at him. Instead, he took Elena's hand, guiding her gently toward the door. "You don't deserve to be in a place that doesn't value you," he told her softly. Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she nodded. Together, they walked out of the mansion, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. Elena clung to Adrian's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have come, but thank you." Adrian kissed her forehead gently. "I told you, Elena. No one harms my family. Not while I'm alive." Behind them, inside the glittering Harrington mansion, the guests murmured, their whispers sharp with judgment. Ethan Harrington sat pale and shaken, his arrogance stripped bare for the first time in his life. And Charles, staring into his untouched glass of wine, realized that all the wealth in the world could not shield his son from the consequences of cruelty. Elena and Adrian drove away together, leaving the mansion behind. For them, the future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: love, respect, and dignity were worth more than all the money in Crestwood Hills. And Ethan Harrington, he would never forget the night he kicked a pregnant maid, without knowing her husband was a man who could bring even billionaires to their knees.